Good morning, George Hepworth, Grover Park Consulting. Let's build Mike's mobile library. Today we're going to manage the publishers section of our mobile library application, specifically the names of all of the publishers whose materials we're cataloging. We're going to work with the publisher screen where we can either add new publishers or edit existing publishers. We're going to use a SubmitForm command to do that, to add or edit. And I'm going to dive a little bit into a feature of collections called ShowColumns and illustrate how that can help us with the number of columns we want to see, especially when we're looking at SharePoint lists, which have multiple internally generated columns or fields that we don't really need or want in our application. Let's get started. Okay, as in previous videos, I've opened my PowerApps development environment in my Office 365 account and selected the publisher screen. It's blank now because we simply put it in as a placeholder. We haven't yet put anything on it. I'm going to go to my existing copy, the development version, do a Control-C to copy the objects, and I'm just going to bring them over in 3 sets. Move back to this version, Control-V to paste them in. They drop in the wrong position, and that's because by default it starts, I believe it's 40 down from the top, and I have not yet figured out a way to change that default. If I ever do, I will be sure to let you know. It goes in at 40, but if I set it back to 0 where I want it, everything pops into place, more or less. This icon is in the slightly wrong position, but that'll correct itself as I bring the other 2 objects over. The first one is the gallery, which is the gallery showing all of the existing publishers. I'll do the Control-C, bring it back, Control-V to paste it in, and now you can see this icon realigns itself because its X position is set in reference to the gallery. And the final step is to bring in the form where we're doing the editing. Copy C, copy V, paste it into place. And now you can also see that it resolves all of the errors because everything is in place, ready to go. And as a matter of fact, it's virtually ready to operate. We've changed the background colors, of course, to match our development environment. And I see a couple of minor adjustments. These should be in a slightly different position, I believe. But I'll adjust that. So let's start by looking at the item source, the item source for the gallery. I've selected the gallery. You can see the outline. And I've selected the items. In the Access world, this is the equivalent of the data source of a form. The items come from table publisher. We're going to use the searching text box, which is a contains search, to look for the name of a publisher and filter by that entry in that text box if there is one. If there isn't one, of course, it returns the whole list. And then we're going to sort the list that it returns on publisher. And that's what we see here. Let's run that and quickly verify that. We hit the play icon. I'm going to do SC, and that shows me Scribner and Simon & Schuster. I see another minor problem that I have to correct in layout. As you can see, there's a white space there at the left end, so that text, that input box is not in the correct position. Let's fix that and the position of our 2 other icons while we're at it. It is now lying right there. So let's see what the X position of that should be and adjust it as necessary. It is set to 40. I want it to be equal to the left or X position of the header. So I'm going to change that to BL, publisher app title, dot X, and that brings it back where I want it. These two icons I want centered vertically in the space on the gallery for that template. This is the template section is what this is called. And I want it vertically spaced as opposed to flush with the top edge. So let's see what we have for the Y position on them. And it's set to the Y position of the publisher name. So the val publisher name, we select it, and we can see that it is set to take the entire height, excuse me, I started to say width, but it's the entire height of the template section. So because this is now set to the entire height, these are a little bit off. Let's see if we can come up with a math formula that will properly center these. Okay, I put my thinking cap on. I think I have a plan that'll make this work. So let's start with the same initial Y position because we want the top edge of both of them to be the same. And we'll select them both, so that'll happen. So we'll start with that Y position, and then we'll add height divided by 2 so that we get an equal distribution. But we also have to then account for the height of the icons themselves. So we'll do 1/2 of the publisher edit icon. And if my math serves me right, they are now centered vertically within the space available to them. Most of the time, you probably don't want to go to that much trouble. Mainly the reason I'm doing it is just to show you what is possible using basic math functions and anchoring objects on the screen or in the gallery or on a form so that they are lined up and maintain that alignment. With that, I think we're ready to start looking now. Okay, now we should be ready to examine how the mechanics of the screen operate. We have 4 icons: the edit, the delete, the add, and the save. And we'll look at the code behind each of them to see how they work. Let's start with the edit icon. When we click that icon, it does 2 things. First, it sets the value of the variable called our publisher to the value of whatever is selected in that gallery at that point. Since we don't have anything selected right now, it's blank. There's nothing in it. When we do click the edit icon, it will set publisher to the record. And remember, we're always talking about records, not fields. It will set that to the value of the record selected in that gallery. Then it sets the form called form add edit publisher into edit mode. There are several modes for forms, one of which is edit, another of which will be add. If we select the add icon, it's on select action. It's very similar with one difference. Again, we're setting the value of the variable called var publisher to a record. It's a record, but we're just setting it by default blank. Whatever has been selected previously in the gallery, we don't want that in our add new record. Then we set the form, and again, same form add edit publisher, to a new form display mode. Edit in new form. Edit, we send it in a valid record from an existing publisher. If it's new, we send in a blank. The code behind the save icon looks like this. Excuse me, there's a minor problem right there. Okay. First thing it does is it uses the submit form action to send whatever is currently in the form on our screen back to the table or the underlying data source. Submit form is roughly the equivalent in the Access world of exiting a bound form. When you leave a bound form, it automatically saves. Submit form just does exactly the same thing. Whatever is there is sent back. Either it's an add or an edit. Then, in order to refresh our form, reset it, we do two things. We set the value of the var publisher to blank again. We do this in order to prevent a stale reference to a publisher from hanging out in that form. Once we submit it, we don't want it to show the name anymore. So we change var publisher to blank. That gets rid of it. Then we convert the mode of that form back to new form. Now we're ready to regenerate our collection of publishers. If you go back to one of the very, very early videos, we looked at using a collection as the value of the searching filters and the searching, their lookups, which we used as searching filters on our publishers, or excuse me, on our publications form. And we have to rebuild that collection because now we have either a new publisher that wasn't there before or a change to an existing publisher. And we want that collection to be up to date. So we first clear collect, does both, removes whatever's there, adds new. It's going to take the values from the publisher table minus the 3 that I don't want to see and put them back into that collection. And then it adds the default 0 all publishers items to that publishers collection. I'm going to modify this because I never did really like it, and I think I have a better way to do that now. To save time, I went ahead and added this code into the window here below, and I'll just scroll down so we can see it. The first line is the same. The submit form, set the var publisher blank, and convert it to new form. We don't need to do that. I changed the way this other part works slightly. First step is I separated the clear and the collect into 2 parts, mainly because I wanted to be sure that I was getting this exactly the same way I did in the original. So we're going to put the clear publisher up here. That clears the collection. Then we add the defaults for the 0 all placeholders. And we can remove this section. And in place of the drop columns, which only serves to hide a handful of them, we're going to do it with ShowColumns. And then we'll remove this because we've just duplicated that above. Let's format the text so we can concentrate on them separately. We're going to clear the publisher collection, empty it out. We're going to rebuild it by starting with the two defaults, the 0 and all publishers. And then we're going to collect back in the publisher collection from the table publisher. This time, instead of dropping unwanted columns, I'm only going to show columns that I do want, which are the ID and the publisher columns. Publisher ID and 0. Interestingly enough, in working this out, I ran into that same old issue that I've harped on 3 or 4 times in previous videos, where sometimes the alias that we have given to the ID field in a SharePoint list is available as that ID alias. Sometimes, as in this case, when I'm collecting those records from the publisher table, I had to use the internal name ID to get it to work correctly. Just one more case of that. Now, with this format, save our form with whatever is it, clear the form out, set it to a blank, and then new form, and then rebuild the publisher collection with whatever has been done. The final icon on this page, or on this screen, is the delete, and what it does is, as you would guess, delete a record. And the syntax for that is pretty simple. Remove from the publisher table whatever this item is. There is no warning that that's going to happen. It simply, bang, does it. So exercise caution. So with that, we have looked at all of the functionality in the publisher table. Let's play the app, go back to our start screen, and just walk through one time adding and editing 2 records just to see that everything is correct. We're going to go Home, select Publishers. We arrive back at the screen. We can filter. Got Harcourt, Harper, HarperCollins. These look like they may be duplicates, don't they? I can edit. I'm going to put a question mark there just to remind myself that I might want to do something about that. I'll verify that that's a legitimate publisher. Save it. Blanks out my edit form in the right half of the screen. Updates the gallery with that selected item. I can add an item, and I'm going to do again, the same thing happens. Once it's added, it clears out the form, and that item now appears in my list of books in the gallery, and I can remove it by clicking the delete icon, and with no warning, it simply goes away. I believe that's everything I wanted to show you with this particular screen and the updates and the changes that we made. I believe there is one more thing that we may want to add later. It's not part of the current environment, so it's something that we will add. Once we get our development copy all set up, we'll come back and start making those enhancements and changes and additions that are part of the development effort. For now, we'll call it a day. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you were enjoying and learning from these videos. Please hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when the next installment drops. And hit the like button to let me know you're getting something useful out of it. I'll see you next time.